Look around a city and you'll see a multitude of stories waiting to be told, but you might not realize just how complex and layered the explanation is. Join our motley cast of urban dwellers and planners as we research, question, and sometimes fall deep down a rabbit hole. I'm Ellen.
I'm Matt.
I'm Tess.
And I'm Zach.
And this is Multi-Story.
Welcome to another episode of Multi-Story. Today we're going to be having some fun. We're going to be looking at some AI renderings of cityscapes, and we are going to be reacting. And what I love about AI is that it takes all of our data out there that represents our culture, our society, all of the knowledge in the world, video, spoken word, all of the text, blends it all together and distills it into a model. You can think of it as like a giant cloud where concepts start to condense inside of this giant multidimensional cloud. And it's like a mirror. And we're going to hold this mirror up to ourselves, and we're going to ask it some questions. We're going to give it some prompts. We're going to react. It's going to be a good time.
This is the most philosophical I think we've gotten on this. I like it.
Yeah. I came for funny pictures, Zach. This sounds serious.
You went all highbrow with it.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a picture of a beautiful European city, and we're going to ask the model to Americanize it. And so the idea behind this is that we're going to see what our society as a whole, distilled down into an AI model, thinks the differences between a European city and an American city.
What do we expect? Is it just going to add cars, highways? Like, obviously we have our biases, but you want to play prediction games, or you just want to wait?
Yeah, I like this. I wonder if it will add like a bunch of signage, like maybe fast food or something like that. Maybe it drives through.
I've got ChatGPT and Sora here. And I think for this one, we're just going to do an image. So we're going to use Dolly. All right, I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so it's already a pretty American-centric model. Let's keep that in mind, too. How much do we think? So, Matt, what was your actual prediction? What are you thinking it's going to add? We have a European scape. What is the model going to, how is it going to Americanize?
So it's hard to know like what its biases are going to be, but I wonder and like what the cultural zeitgeist or the preponderance of like urban information. It could put a lot of like glass towers in it, like New York Midtown style, because that's sort of a cliche. It could put highways and cars in it, because that's sort of like I don't know. It depends on how negative it is.
All right, the first thing I'm going to do is find a good picture.
Okay.
And Ellen, you asked which model, which reminds me that there's a brand new photo model from Mistral, which is the French AI company. And I wonder if the same prompt yields a different set of things from the French model compared to the American model.
Exactly. I think it'd be super interesting to know. This is also like my current job is in AI, so it's very interesting to me to kind of understand. I should have dug into like what they actually were using to train these multimodal models of like producing the images and things.
I'm also curious. I've used Firefly, which is Adobe's product, and their differentiator is basically like copyright safety, that they've only used commercially viable because there are problems with ChatGPT potentially. And, you know, there will be creatives on the internet that will criticize the very premise of this episode because they see that every AI is sort of creative theft. That's the Firefly difference. But I do wonder what bias is just having commercially approved, basically like stock photos introduces as well.
Ooh, that's a good point, because those would be the like quote unquote ideal, right? Like, or they'd either be, or maybe they'd be the other way around. Like you're trying to exemplify the problems in a city.
Well, I wonder if it would just be the extremely sanitized version of everything, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
Okay, wider streets, more cars.
Yeah.
Fewer bikes, more pedestrians. Okay. Interesting.
This is like Family Feud. I feel like I got number 3 on the list here.
You totally did. Like number 3 was billboards.
Yeah.
Wait, well, can we see the reasons before we see the results?
Yeah.
Yes.
Larger
Street
buildings and billboards.
Trucks.
Street signs.
More
and traffic.
pickup trucks. That is so true. Like a pickup truck here in France is a very rare thing. Like,
I like swap out bikes for pickup trucks, Jeeps or Teslas.
Oh my gosh. And then it says add chain restaurants. It's interesting that it said to keep outdoor dining, but you have to make them generic, like Chipotle, Dunkin', or sports bar with big screen TVs.
well, yeah. Well, and it says American flags. So I do think that's a thing, like that intense public patriotism, I think is a distinction that I have certainly noticed. And like sports gear. Oh my goodness.
Your
You were-
popsicles.
Musicals. What is
Wow.
this? Is such a good example of
Bro, did you see the street sign? The street,
Right.
the street,
Yes.
our street was called
Okay,
Crosswalk.
this is what we started with, a nice kind of fisheye view of a corner city, corner streetscape.
And there's an F-150 just right in the middle of the intersection.
Oh, look, yeah, they're blocking the crosswalk on both sides. It's perfect.
It's so good. It's also
Oh,
almost all trucks. Especially like in the
Oh.
foreground, it's almost all trucks.
and the street sign says crosswalk.
Crosswalk.
And there's some Teslas. Oh my gosh.
There's like an America badge on that office building behind there.
Oh my gosh.
All
it's
the
like-
flags are out.
yeah.
It did put in some street trees.
It's actually not bad for like.
It's not bad.
It feels
Yeah,
like
I mean,
New York. Like
yeah.
it feels to me like New York if you then just leaned in on every stereotype.
And I think, I wonder if part of it is it's pulling from the day it was trained on. And if it was trained on photos, places that are photographed more are going to be more prevalent in the model.
Exactly.
And people don't take pictures of random, suburbia.
It's true. There's also a lot
Oh,
of
we got a Starbucks.
And an NFL building.
an NFL building.
This is
We dedicate our lives to the
Oh, man.
Okay,
And
I'm gonna put it in Sora too, just to see if it can.
this is like a pretty hard hitting social commentary.
So I'm gonna share this first. I took an old black and white photograph of Kansas City. This is no longer existing in Kansas City, but this is historic Kansas City. And I colorized it with a different AI service, and then I asked it to animate it here. And I thought it was pretty cool, bringing the historic to life. And there's some problems with it, like this guy just gets clobbered by this car and disappears.
He's gone, right?
The idea of
Well,
separating
I think
black from the streets wasn't part of it yet.
I mean, I think this is kind of historical though, right? Like when cars appeared on the street, they were a menace. Like all the papers were full of stories about the safety scourge of cars and the whole battle between who got to be in the streets that eventually, cars drove pedestrians and other users off to the edges of the streets.
Yeah, they invented jaywalking to shame the pedestrians.
There's a great video of San Francisco before the Great Fire where they strapped a camera onto the front of a cable car going down the middle of the street. And it seems like chaos to our modern sensibilities because it's just people weaving in and out of each other, people selling things in the middle of the street, like a man carrying a baby. There's bicycles, and then there's a bunch of cars weaving in and out. And the cars are new. And actually, if you look closely, the cars are they're just going in a loop. And the people who made the video wanted San Francisco to seem like a wealthy city. And so they wanted to seem like there was a lot of cars. So they asked everybody in town who had a car to just drive it over and over again through the video.
So my first prompt, I'll just start with the image. So with the Firefly model, it gives you like 4 options. So I just put those 4 together. And the prompt was just an ideal mixed use neighborhood. And I think you'll find the biases in here quite amusing. It's interesting because it cannot make any sort of, there's one example down here of a structure that is not a traditional single family home roof, but its whole idea of where someone lives is a single family home pointy roof. No matter what typology of housing, you try to tell it, like, give me multi-story buildings, give me multifamily residences. It always is just like a single family home turned into a McMansion AI hallucination.
I have some thoughts about this, right? Because again, thinking about the data that the model is pulling from, what in the world, where do you find mixed use neighborhood? And I think it's most often as sort of a marketing or a descriptor for a new development. And what you're seeing, I think, is what like come to Shady Acres, new mixed use development and whatever, right? And a lot of them look like this. Like, I feel like this looks like
green.
there are a lot of developments that look like this. Think of a seaside in Florida, or not seaside, Celebration. I forget.
Yeah.
Like those new urbanist communities, or like
Totally.
Newtown and in St. Charles. Like, they describe themselves as mixed use neighborhoods, and this is what they build, right? So I am seeing pedestrian connections. I'm seeing houses a lot closer together. I'm seeing, you said single family, but what I see here are a bunch of buildings that are designed to have queues that are like single family housing,
Right.
but are actually multifamily housing with like,
They're like inoffensive, palatable fourplexes.
Right. This is what a lot of new mixed-use development tries to do and looks like, right? So intensive landscaping, calm streets, pedestrian connections, and this very intentional village feel, right? So I think this has captured like a very specific category of like new mixed-use development.
This top right folder reminds me exactly of a development like that test in Oklahoma City, where they are infilling an old airfield pretty close to downtown. And it's pretty low density, but it's this kind of building. And every block has a sidewalk going right down the middle of it to make it very pedestrian friendly.
I feel like part of what we got there is that the walkability equals sidewalks. It's not actually taking into account the rest of what walkability would be, like something to do, something to look at, something that's visually interesting beyond just having a place where your feet go instead of where a car goes.
Yeah, I think if you said urban mixed-use neighborhood, then you would get the like 5/1, 6/1, like first floor retail apartment buildings with
5/1 and 6/1, meaning what does that mean?
Like one level of commercial uses with 5 or 6 stories of residential on top.
Okay. I do wonder if the prompt is more specific than the model would have been trained on. So like, I feel like what the model probably got trained on is like photos similar to this that said, this is a house, this is a store, this is a this is a that. But nowhere in the metadata does it say, and all of this together is mixed use. So the model is trying to understand what you meant by mixed use.
Yeah.
Versus understanding like that broader urban idea. Or broader design idea, I should say.
I think all of that is right. There are definitely like echoes of familiar things here, but it doesn't feel real totally on its own.
Exactly.
Do any of you want to live here?
It feels gentrified too. No, I don't want to live here.
I think it looks lovely. I mean, provided that like those taller buildings in the background are where like the grocery store and the pharmacy are, this looks like
I do love that it's mixed use, but there is only one use.
I think that's my like bugaboo with all of this. It's like, no.
Maybe this is the future where commercial has gone all to delivery apps and repurposed all of our social spaces.
Well, Zach, the wounds were just barely healing, and now you've ripped the bandage off.
Behold, dystopia. All right, I got another one.
If this is dystopian to you, then I feel like your bar is much higher than mine.
I mean, it's not dystopian, but I don't see anywhere I really want to go in a collective way.
I
This is
feel
all
like
private space.
as much as you asked for mixed use, what we see is single use, i.e., this is living, dwelling space. So this is not go to
Right.
the store, go to work, go to something recreational, like go to a sports game, and then go to your home. It's as if they said, well, your home, and it's kind of urban.
I guess I'm just impressed there aren't like dinosaurs walking through the streets, right? Like, I think the model did pretty good.
Yeah, I'd agree.
This is mixed use. You can share this sidewalk. There you go. That counts. Okay. My next prompt, I don't remember exactly what the language was, but I just said a bustling city street. Well, I know the beginning. A bustling city street dominated by human-scaled infrastructure and teeming with people on ... I think bikes and on foot. So this was a little bit more specific. So it took me to some sort of weird garment district of New York meets Amsterdam,
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought was Amsterdamish, Denmarkish.
where
I know.
people cycle
Amsterdam's
through
not Denmark.
bench cargo bikes.
Ooh, without hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good at people. The people and like if you look
Straight
closely
through
at the bicycles, like the fenders sort of wiggle, the wheels distort.
At the very
I
beginning,
feel like this
the
is
first bike goes straight through the bench.
Yeah, right here.
this
Here's
is
his
what
moment.
people who don't like cyclists imagine cyclists do.
Take over the entire space, including
Right,
through the
right. They've
benches.
taken over everything. They're driving through your cafe lunch. They're knocking over infrastructure. They're in big packs. They're in big packs of people.
Disregarding
right,
physics
like,
just to make you mad.
yeah. I feel like the model has read a lot of people complaining about cyclists.
That's probably true. But I think that was a better prompt, Matt, because it like described everything. Though you had what was the phrase in there that was like, oh, human scale infrastructure. I don't know that a model's gonna know that because it's such a niche.
Yeah, no.
But it did get more of, I feel like this was more representative of what we think of as our biased ideal.
Except for what Tess was saying. These poor people just got blasted by those bikes in the same way that Zach's turn of the century pedestrians just got ran over by a Model T. The Model T has no regard for intersecting objects.
I think it's very American to sort of strictly segregate the different modes of transportation on a street. Like cars have to be in a separate place from bikes, a separate place from pedestrians, and the pedestrians are walking have to be in a separate place from the pedestrians are sitting, and all of that is in a separate zone from where the landscaping goes. I think across the pond, there's a lot more streets like this where just expectations change depending on the size and character of the street. And there aren't clear delineations between pedestrian space and bicycle space,
right,
and moving space and vending space and eating space. But there's a different set of norms and expected behaviors that help to facilitate that too, and a different level of familiarity.
Yeah, there's a sort of ongoing like low-key negotiation. I also noticed these cyclists right here, this guy in the black on the left, eventually he becomes a pedestrian, but as a bit bow-legged, as if the ghost bicycle's still there. And then this person in red, I don't know where they came from. They weren't there before. But person in black runs into bench, loses bicycle, becomes pedestrian, makes friend. This is the narrative.
And like everyone's a typical in afternoon.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it'd be nice if you didn't have to find a bike rack, right? You could just sort of snap your fingers and whisk it away.
Yeah, you're like a Animorph, but you're a bicycle.
All you do, the secret, you should try it, Tess. Just crash into a bench that looks also like a parked cargo bike merged with a, I don't know what, and suddenly your bicycle will disintegrate. And
I like the collection of furniture here. This is like the store that hasn't opened yet, and they have all of the like security chains on the furniture. It's yet to be deployed, and also some people have locked their bikes up to the furniture, but like the bikes have been there too long, or maybe like the wheels bent. Like all of this tracks. I feel like it looks like an AI mess, but I feel like I've seen that spot.
like it's not doing as poorly as you might think. I mean, it's still can't.
You're right. The execution is wrong.
Like this is like a weird bench with like tentacles coming out in all different directions. Like there's some interesting things here. Okay.
Yeah, I think the picnic table, street picnic tables, is an interesting choice because they do kind of make a wall. That's got me thinking.
Yeah.
For like defensible enclosed space.
It's like a barrier that's part of the whole thing.
What do we think this orange thing is on the left here?
Art.
Or, you know, like it was trying to be one of like a bench situation where it's like incorporated into the aesthetic, but it's like not just a bench, but it's something that you can sit on.
Okay.
I was going to say a trash can, but I guess one man's trash is another man's art.
I found this image, okay, of Anywhere USA, where you've got the commercial strip development, and it suggested to Europeanize it, narrow streets and fewer cars, convert parking lots to green spaces, replace traffic lights with roundabouts. Interesting.
I think that's like the first thing that American tourists complain about is roundabouts.
I love them.
Hierarchy is small architecture, narrow multi.
Like transport.
Cobblestones.
So slow it down and make it old.
And outdoor, outdoor commerce.
And so these are the images.
I don't see the original reference material in this.
No.
But I would live here. This looks like Paris, basically.
Yeah.
And this is what sorted with it, with that same prompt. So there's a scooter somewhere. Urban Rapture.
Second, like go back to those other European ones with the bike lanes, though.
Sure.
This is, I think, what I would have expected to see first. It's like, hey, take this and make it European. This is like cliche European, right? Like quintessential. With the bistro chairs and the bike lanes and people
It's like
walking.
tasteful, low step over Dutch bike in the foreground.
Mm-hmm.
There was that line about like old architecture, but there's also old cars, old bikes, old streetcars. So everything got old.
Yeah.
Europe equals old. I think the model thinks just Europe is old.
Yeah, it could be like Berlin is what it, with the old cars and the old streetcars, reminds me of.
I like how the bus is just on the sidewalk. No problem.
It did that in the other one too. The cars looked like they were on the sidewalk. So it's like we said we want it to be more, yeah, we didn't say that it needed to be accessible, but I think, didn't we say urban? And you said it that it's like add bike lanes, add this. So it took it too far. It's like, fine, bikes only on the street, cars to the sidewalk.
Well, I think this is where the way we parse this information is maybe different from the way the model parses it, right? Because if it's going to add in some cars and traffic or things like that, in most images that it's going to look at, the place where the bus stops is at the edge of the street in front of the building. So it's put it at the edge of the street in front of the building. But then it's added this layer of it's more European and the street's narrow or whatever, right? So I feel like it put everything in the places where they go, but it didn't connect the pieces together, right? Like maybe that's a limitation of these models as they exist right now, is they can add a bunch of pieces, but they don't yet have the contextual relationship between the pieces, because there's a logic there too that's like it's a second order logic to what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's assembling from a variety of clues. Still looks like a pretty nice place.
Yeah.
I will point out they use the cobblestones. You talked about accessibility. So they have this accessibility strip for the visually impaired that lets them know when they're leaving the sidewalk zone and entering traffic. And they've done it in the form of these cobblestones or like a texture change in the pavement material. So that I think that's an interesting choice.
Yeah. Plus it's visually quite pleasing.
Yeah, I wonder if that, because to me that's just European. It probably is an accessibility choice, but it's, I think, also indicative of a lot of stuff from Europe where they've blended it much better into the aesthetic of the city that you're in. So if it's, here are cobblestones that lead you to this next thing, or in Copenhagen, like the bike lanes are barely raised from the traffic lanes, but it's still enough that it's not visually jarring, but it's enough to keep the cars where they should be and keep the bikes safe. And I feel like it's more inherent in Europe than it is in the US, where we're, when we put in a bike lane, here's bright green paint, here's something that makes it obvious, instead of something that is to that human scale or the human aesthetic, something that feels cohesive.
To extend your point, Ellen, the tactile feature for the visually impaired in the US, that would be bright yellow plastic truncated domes.
Mm-hmm.
The bollards in the other photo would be like plastic delineators, probably in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just the permanence, the feeling of permanence, I think is how I would characterize it, because this is like made out of stone and it's inbuilt as opposed to a piece of plastic.
And there's probably a quality over price argument in there as well, because in the US, if you're trying to pedestrianize a street, you have to fight for your funding to begin with, and then you have to spend it to get as far as you can. So you might wind up with different materials than you would in Europe, where they are trying to maintain the aesthetic that the city had to begin with. If you have a nice aesthetic, you get to keep
Now
it
we
nice.
just have more linear feet of everything. We just can't afford to make it nice because we got too much of it.
That's true. I mean, there's an argument there of there's a lot of America.
Too much America.
But there are new streets and new neighborhoods that look like this in Europe as well. So I do think it's a matter of design and functional philosophy, right? Like, do we have a tall curb and concrete barriers that separate modes, or do we have an accurate transition between pedestrian and vehicle areas, and we're using furnishings like lighting and bollards and planter boxes to define those zones, right? It's a different approach to organizing the space that is often unrelated to how established or old a place is. It's just a different way to do it.
So this prompt was very straightforward. I gave it a lot of room to run. I just put in an urbanist's wet dream.
I like that it's actually wet.
Yeah, I mean, you
understand what you're going for here.
You want it to be moist. So I don't know if it kind of maybe took that literally. It's also very dreamlike, but I found it interesting. It's very trippy and dreamlike.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of was hoping like, oh, it's going to give us some sort of idealized notion of what the world should be like.
It has.
It doesn't do that.
The cars morph from being cars parked on the side to becoming bushes. I like that. If when
It
you
looks like they add rail transit.
part of it.
Like, I think to me, I think there's just a lot of this is just prompt engineering, right? Like, I'm sure there's people who are watching this and be like, if you had phrased the prompt in this way, you would have got completely different outcomes, right? Like here, I just see urban and dream and wet and those things put together, right? Without any allusion to an ideal form of anything.
Yeah, is its prompt interpretation enough to understand when those words are put together, it means something different than
Right.
moist.
Stop it. I think that's where we're just.
And we should say for the commenters that putting ourselves at the whims of the models is kind of the point. We're not actually trying to drive the outcome.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that it perceives, to me, when you say urban, there is a hostility here. These buildings are very tall and looming, and not only are they looming, they arch over the space where the people are occupying. They almost swallow you up, and they sort of swallow up the sky, right? So they're sort of projecting out over these arcades. There's lights on inside, but outside the buildings, it is kind of dark and foreboding until you like pass into the afterlife at the end there, right? And it looks like you're heading towards the light, and then you start to see the fiery glow, and maybe you made the wrong choices.
I like this paned glass. It's a very
I was just noticing that
residential paradigm.
Idealistic cozy shop on the bottom, and then as modern as possible for the everything above that.
Yeah, even like warm light and very cool light. Everything's blue up there, everything's yellow down here.
Yeah.
It's trippy. I stared at this for a while. I'm like, this is what's going on in here.
There's sort of hints of parking podiums in there too, right? Like those are ubiquitous enough that there's this distinction. There's this ground level active space, then a parking podium, and then other uses on top. The language model did a pretty good job at capturing common perceptions, right? Like that bullet list of what makes an American city different from a European city or vice versa, I think captured a lot of things that people would mention if you just went and asked them, right? So like the image interpretation, I feel like that's still like sort of an evolving technology, right? Maybe that I'm sure that will continue to rapidly evolve. But at least the language models seem to have the capacity to present these contrasts in a meaningful way.
What do we feel like was revealed in this exercise? Did we learn anything? Or were our own biases reinforced?
I feel like Tess highlighted a lot of the biases that I think we can perceive through the responses about what the word urban means, what mixed use means in the context of how the model would have access to that term, how things are used and characterized in sort of marketingese and sort of misinterpreted or misappropriated in a way that like distorts the way that some overlord without contextual information is going to interpret what our cities look like.
Yeah. What do you think, Zach?
It's interesting. I went to planning school because as a young idealistic person, I feel like a lot of people who go to planning school feel this way. They aren't entirely content with our society and our culture. And the built environment is like the largest manifestation of our culture. And I studied abroad in Germany and spent time in other European cities. And when I came back, I was really excited to go to planning school and become an urban planner and make our cities more like these European cities I experienced. And I guess reliving a little bit of that through trying to get these models to morph a American city to a European city and vice versa, but also kind of reliving some of the frustration because you can't really, I feel, change our cityscapes without changing our overall culture. And so that's what I've been thinking about recently is like how to take a step up and from just the tactical, like let's change our cityscapes to let's change our culture and how we do that.
Those are my. It's really interesting. Do you think that what the model sees is a trailing indicator because it's based on history and status quo bias, or is that our destiny? Like, are we different now, and this is outdated? Like, we are building multimodal infrastructure. All of us would probably argue not quickly enough or prolifically enough.
Yeah, I think it is dated. I mean, it absorbed everything that is in the past. And yeah, I'm hopeful things can change and that we can do a better job than Sora at designing a more European-like city experience.
Do you think it's a catch-22 when it comes to the culture shift? It's like, can you shift the culture through better infrastructure, or does it, which comes first, chicken and egg, maybe not a catch-22?
Yeah, I guess I used to believe that city design could be a way to shift how we live. And I still think that to a certain extent, but now I'm kind of thinking that I had it backwards in that how we live and our values will ultimately be manifested in the built environment.
Yeah. It's so tough though, because I think people generally don't give themselves the permission to imagine the world being different, or it doesn't occur to them. I mean, that was one of the reasons that I advocated for streetcar. I wasn't sure if anybody would write it in Kansas City, but I do think it was a symbol of sort of cultural intent, a difference in the way we were going to build the city moving forward.
I think it's really interesting that you phrased it that way, because what's been rotating through my mind as I'm listening to Zach and you now is that machine learning models typically, like, if they create something new, that's called a hallucination. So if it's doing something incorrectly, I guess is what it's called a hallucination. But you're kind of hoping that the model could take the best bits and make something that is new. And it's interesting because in AI, there would be this really weird line to walk of letting the machine actually create and not just reproduce, not just take all of the data that it ingests and say, if you want something like this, this is my reference. So as far as if we want to ask the models, if we want to ask AI to build something for us, it would be a lot of teaching it to understand what the best bits are, and those are going to be inherently biased.
It would be interesting to ask it to improve things or something like that, right?
Right. And I think that's where the industry on the whole struggles, is that it can't necessarily improve, but it can reproduce current best practices. And there's a lot of just research going around about, like, how is AI, even with writing, like, how is that now starting to affect the way that we write and the way that we are communicating? Like, there's a study about the word delve and how often the word delve is being used, and it's like normal, and then ChatGPT comes on and it spikes like 20x because people have started using ChatGPT to, like, get their rough draft and then read, like, they're not rewriting the word delve. And it's something along those lines of, like, the word delve showed up more in its training data, so it uses it more in its outputs. And so if we were to train these urban models on what we think the ideal is, we could get it to start putting out our ideal, but we couldn't necessarily get it to understand what a true medium is between our ideal and our neighbor's ideal.
I think there's a little bit here that's like, there's sort of Plato's allegory at the cave, right? Like, we're looking at the shadows on the wall, and the AI model has these impressions of a city or an urban area, and those are like the final output impressions, right? Or like, we're talking about what a city is, and we're like, did this come from culture, or did the culture come from the way these things are shaped? But like, cities don't come pre-printed, right? So I think my takeaway from this is a reminder of how complex our urban environments are, right? Like, what we are seeing and what we are experiencing is the result of, like, exponentially expanding connections and interrelations between people, between places, between materials, between activities, between movements, between ideas, between different energies, between cultures, between histories, right? And all of that layers up and stacks on each other. And then you get this output that we can take a snapshot of the picture of. And that's what ChatGPT sees. And when we talk about our experience of a place, that's what we see, those end outputs. But the things that are making the places where we are all of these layered systems and layered histories and timelines. And without that context, these models are never going to be able to realistically imagine what could be, right? Because what could be depends on how we move all of those different levers and those exponentially complex relationships. I mean, never say never, right? Like, I'm sure we're going to see some great things, and like next year, like planners won't have a job anymore. The robots will do it. Maybe so, but like, I think what we see here is it's not like, how do we make this structure or cityscape that feels like the right cityscape. Like what we need to be doing is unpacking what sets of systems and behaviors and experiences yield the outcomes that we agree are better for each other. And that's just several layers or orders higher in terms of how we're thinking about this. And I think a lot of the challenges we have in planning and thinking about making better cities comes from people talking about it in terms of the output or the visceral experience without having that context. And so, I'm excited that we're doing this podcast and we're looking at all sorts of complicated things with multi-story, right? Because I think it's interesting to unpack that. And I wonder if we came back to this again in the future and we had some prompts that were based on the connections of these higher order things, if we might see some more interesting outputs from these text models and image models.
And I
like attend 500 city council meetings and NIMBY group organizations.
I mean,
and then come up with a plan based on what you heard.
So that's actually related to what I'm thinking. When I hear you say that, Tess, it's, I think, an irony of AI is that what you described sounds like you should put a large model against it. It's like here, you listed off the top of your head, 10, 12 different variables, right? And each time you layer one of those, it's exponential in the outcome that it might be. But knowing that, it's like, so that basically you're like, every city, though, grew, yes, from those variables, but in its own way and became its own city, even though there are these similarities. But then, Matt, what you just said is actually more of what a city, I think, would want to apply AI to do is say, go look through this city's notes for the last however long you can to figure out what that city's culture is, what that city has typically decided. And then take the large set of data of what the best practices of city building or what a typical trajectory of city building becomes, because that's where you would wind up with something that is bespoke enough to actually mesh with the culture and be realistic enough to build. But it's the idea of AI right now is so shiny and has so much buzz around it, but we're not actually to a point where, as far as I know, cities are building their own KC's AI ChatGPT model. But that's, I think,
well, I don't even think, I mean, I want to say, I don't even think it's we're on a path and we'll get there, and as the models get better, it'll get better. I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how knowledge exists to think that that's possible, right? There's a lot of hubris in the idea that if we just had all of these inputs and put them in and dialed them in exactly the right way, then the master planner could spit out the perfect place, right? And that's not how that's not how cities work, and that's not
how humans work.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think I think it's a very common impulse to want to be able to build these big data, smart city, machine learning outputs, but they are always flawed from the beginning because they're informed by the people who are making them with the knowledge that they have, and so they're always going to miss the mark. And if we don't remember that, then we're going to have problems.
Until they steal our content, then they're going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because a big discussion among AI is how do you remove the bias? And I think what I just heard you say, Tess, is a bit of, if you remove the bias, you're whitewashing it too much. You're genericizing it too much to where then it's not actually usable anymore, because what you need is the human element. So it was even funny, when you said all the urban planners are going to lose their jobs, that's legit what marketing, LinkedIn marketing feeds were saying 2 years ago is, oh my God, copywriters are out of a job in 2 years. No, because ChatGPT is generic, and humans want to hear from humans. So there's always going to be these humans involved, even if you're using AI as a tool.
I think ChatGPT could write a pretty dope staff report.
Yeah. Let's
ability to call functions, see what the zoning is, see where the nearest water line is. Bam.
Yeah. I think there's a future for AI in all of this, but I think that there's still a long way to go.
Okay, so humans design cities and history design cities and AI writes staff reports. I'm comfortable with that.
I like
That said, as somebody who wrote a lot of staff reports.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if we could give the sign permit review to AI, I don't think anyone's going to complain.
Fair enough.
We can offload that, and then we can spend our time actually getting people together to bottom up plan a city together.
Yeah. If we don't have to write staff reports, we can all start attending the city zoning meetings.
It's a bridge too far.
Bye.
Can't do that anymore.